So, Jim, as you can see from my cup,
I can't read it. There's a glare on the front of it.
oh, it says I poured myself a cup of ambition.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because you went to Dollywood, Dolly World, Dolly something.
Dollywood, yeah.
You got your Dolly Parton shirt on there. Very nice.
Right, and then of course, by the time this comes out, the sci-fi world would have been rocked that Dolly is now part of the sci-fi world too. If you hadn't heard already about that.
No, I have not heard.
Oh, a wonderful thing. Do you have Hulu?
Do I have Hulu? Yes.
Okay, then do you watch The Orville?
I do not.
Okay, you have to watch it. I'm not going to do it.
I'm not a fan of Seth MacFarlane, but I know a lot of people like The Orville, which is great. I've got the soundtrack. Weirdly enough, I like to buy music scores for stuff I may not have seen, and I got the first first two seasons. I'm not sure what's on the disc, but I like the music. So is it good? Are you enjoying it?
I when there was no Star Trek on TV, it made me happy that I had something, and that was close to it, even if it was a spoof. And the third season has rocked my world. I'm really Star Trek it definitely has somebody who knows their formula. And there's a little competition out there. I love healthy competition in anything we do, but this third season rocked me. And the latest episode, which I won't spoil for you.
Dolly's in it. Interesting.
Cool.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's funny that you say when there was no Star Trek on TV. Like in my world, that never happens. That's why I have everything on disc, and I've got the streaming service, right? So like, there's always Star Trek on TV. Like it may not be new Star Trek, but there's always Star Trek on TV. Anyway,
that is true. It's never been off. But we are here to talk about Star Trek adventures. I don't want to get us in trouble, but I love sci-fi in so many forms. Of course, we know Star Trek inspired it all in the first place. So we're happy about that. And today we're here talking about something great. But before we get to that, let's do our normal introductions. I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures, in addition to one of the writers on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 blog fan site for Star Trek Adventures, the game. And Jim, introduce yourself.
Yep, sure thing. My name's Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, published by Modiphius Entertainment, and co-host of the show, here to talk about the Gamma Quadrant Sourcebook. Yeah,
that's right. And I do want to admit too, because I of course always look at the background of everything you have reading. I ended up watching that Beastie Boys documentary you told me to. That was amazing.
Yeah, wasn't it great? Yeah. So the only thing I want to note is I don't know if you can see it, but this is my new acquisition. Just came in a couple of days or a couple of weeks ago. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. This is Kate Bush, How to Be Invisible. This is a compilation of a lot of her lyrics. She's a fantastic singer. She's getting a new boost thanks to Stranger Things. They've been running. They had one of her songs, "Running Up That Hill," was in Stranger Things a lot, and so she's been getting a lot of airplay. Her song's been like #1 for weeks now in the UK and around the world, and so she's gotten a new surge of new fans. And I've been a fan of hers since the 70s, and I knew that. I just stumbled on the fact that she did a limited number of these books in hardbound, and I managed to find a copy. So I'm looking forward to digging into that. But
isn't it interesting how much modern pop culture, more so than ever, is getting wrapped into sci-fi? Dolly's in Orville, Kate Bush is in Stranger Things, Beastie Boys, of course, we know is all over Star Trek movie, cinematic universe. So that's kind of cool. I think it's smart that they do that, because it makes, and I like how they always refer to it as classical music by the time they get to the future, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's not classical yet, but boy, do I feel it sometimes.
Right. I know when I was watching, when I was watching the Beastie Boys documentary, they're older than me, and it's not by much. And I'm sitting there like my nieces and nephews are like, "Oh, it's old hip hop." I'm like, "Shut up." Okay. Anyways,
not just old hip hop, but it's old. It's the foundation, part of the foundation. The Beastie Boys certainly weren't the foundation, but there were plenty before them. But they added a lot to it, and I think sometimes they're underappreciated. But I think those of us who grew up with them, we know.
Yeah, and again, this totally segues into Star Trek Adventures, the Gamma Quadrant, because I think on Deep Space Nine, one of the coolest things was some of their holodeck programs and some of their throwbacks, whether it was to baseball, 20th century baseball, or whether it was to the classic jazz lounge that was a popular venue. It became a super great venue on the Gamma Quadrant, on Deep Space Nine. So let's talk to us about the Gamma Quadrant, what you all were thinking about it, Jim, when this was being launched.
Yeah, so this was, this must have been 2018, 2019 when we were developing this book. And at the time we were working on this one, the Beta Quadrant book and the Alpha Quadrant book had already come out, or had come out already. And we were working on, we were finishing up the Science Division book, and we were working on the Strange New Worlds Adventure Supplement. And, every release, we were kind of advancing the timeline of the game a little bit from the default 2371 that we did in the core book. And we knew that the Gamma Quadrant book would be pretty heavily focused on the Dominion War, because that's where we were getting to, because we knew this book would really cover late DS9, Dominion War, and then the Delta Quadrant book would pick up on Voyager and all the shenanigans that happened with Voyager. But so Gamma Quadrant, it was the first book we had done. I mean, because you have to remember, this was a couple years ago now. This was the first book that we did that really kind of expanded a lot of the possibilities, because we were going into a new quadrant with all new species that weren't members of Starfleet, weren't members of the Federation. They were completely different. And we had to figure out, okay, we want to make sure that those species are playable as character species, and to give player groups an opportunity to play the Odo, Kira, Quark type characters who are main characters in their own right in their series, but aren't Starfleet, may have a very different perspective, et cetera. So I think, where we've talked about how the Shackleton book and the Player's Guide have really just blown open the doors on how expansive the game line is now. That really kind of got started with the Gamma Quadrant book, because this is the first time we really focused on species that weren't standard, Federation species. So I think
the book launches, and the book launches straight into action. I'm going to share the opening jacket. I love this picture here. Right away, you see the changed Alpha Quadrant based off of the Dominion War, which is from 2373 to 2375. I love the key here, where it shows you all the key battles that we're aware of. I mean, look at this. All the way over here to Earth, there's this Dominion Raider skirmish. That's how far they went, from out of the wormhole. Again, here's Deep Space Nine here. They hit all these hundreds of light years or dozens of light years to even be so bold as to take Earth. So this was fun. When I got the book, I was trying to figure out, man, which show was each of these skirmishes in? I kind of keep it next to me when I watch the show now and trying to locate it here. This must have been fun for you to meditate on too, right?
Yeah, this was fun. This was an opportunity for us to take the maps that we'd already done in the first bunch of books and kind of expand on them, do something a little bit different. And Michał Cross was the layout expert on this one, and he did a great job with this. I was really pleased when it all came together, and we were able to do something that wasn't just the quadrant maps again, that by that point fans had seen repeatedly, and we were like, okay, we need to do something a little different. So we dropped that in there just to really focus on the war. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, that was heck of fun. And of course, on page 2, we get the cool schematics. We know how much we love schematics here of the Defiant class space frame prototype preparation, which is probably one of the baddest design ships on the Starfleet line, don't you think?
Yeah. The Defiant remains one of my favorites, just because when we saw it in season 3 of DS9, it was just so different from the standard Starfleet look and feel. It was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And then of course they went on and did a bunch of adventures with it. But yeah, this schematic came together really nicely. And Michał put that together too.
I always feel like it's thicker. We just finished talking in the last episode about the Kaplan, about the La Serena, and how it's a scale 3 ship and how it's a little bulkier and rugged. And I always, from the moment I saw the Defiant on screen, I felt, man, you do not want that thing ramming into you. That thing's going to hold up, and you are not. So it's really, as we know, built for battle. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Welcome to the Gamma Quadrant, the introduction there. How do we use it in a game, the Gamma Quadrant?
Yeah, so just like the beta and alpha quadrant books, this just continues the theme, just in focusing on a different part of the galaxy. It's structured pretty much like we were intentional about structuring these books pretty much the same, chapter by chapter, and just to make to make them easy to use, but B, just so that you know what to expect, and if you need to quickly flip to a specific chapter, then you know where to go. So this is really all about it's a lot about DS9, Bajor, the Cardassians, the Dominion War, like everything that happened in the war, because that's been a very popular setting for a lot of game groups over the years. I mean, even back in the day, like even before Star Trek Adventures, right? When I was playing, we really kind of liked this period of time because there was just so much stuff on television that we could take advantage of, right? And there was a clean slate after it, right? Like after the war, what happens? You just make it up, do it yourself. And so we just wanted to really focus on that. But then we also provided some insights into the Gamma Quadrant too, because that's an opportunity, either post-war or pre-war. Maybe your ship is assigned to the Gamma Quadrant, you're off exploring, doing stuff, running into the Dominion, running into any of these new species. So we just wanted to drop in just a lot of opportunities for plot hooks, plot seeds, encounters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and that jumps us into chapter 2 right away, where we get into the Dominion. What's your opinion of the Dominion? I've never asked you that. Well, Dominion, pros, cons. Do you think they had?
Yeah, and I'm a huge DS9 stan. Like I think you know that, right? Like I really liked when I was growing up. I watched a lot of original series reruns, of course, and then I was in college when Next Gen came out, and I was like, wow, Next Gen is really good. I'm loving it. But I'll tell you, when DS9 came out, that spoke to me in a way different than Next Gen did. I was like, wow, they're really expanding, because they were able to get into topics that Next Gen was trying to kind of like avoid the conflict, right? And DS9, like right from the first episode, Emissary, there was a lot of conflict between Kira and Sisko and Quark and Odo, and there's just so much going on. I was like, wow, this is really dynamic. Plus, they added that whole faith element with the Bajorans, and Sisko suddenly thrust into a position as not just a Federation commander trying to figure it out, right? But he's also all of a sudden the emissary of the Bajoran people. It's like, how do you deal with that, right? And so, like, it was just so different, and it really appealed to me. And the cast, the ensemble cast, was just amazing. And it was, I mean, I hate to say it, but it was kind of bold for them at the time to cast Avery Brooks as the captain, and not only to be the captain, but to be a single father, right? A single black father, which I thought was amazing, because they did such a great job with that relationship between him and Jake. And that really spoke to me quite a bit. And I think it might be because, not to go too far into the weeds here, but it might be because I had some challenges growing up with my dad, and I was always looking for different, relationships to understand better. And so, like the Jacob Ben Sisko relationship was like, wow, that's a really good father-son relationship, and it just really spoke to me. Like I've got all the DS9 reference material on my shelf over here. I look at it all the time. And so I was a huge fan of the Dominion. I think they did a great job creating this adversary that was multi-layered, right? It wasn't just the founders, it was the founders and the Vorta and the Jem'Hadar. So you got like all kinds of different elements and pieces that you can challenge, and speaking specifically of the game now, that you can challenge your players with all these different things. It's like, it's one thing to run into the Jem'Hadar, but then you've got to deal with the Vorta, lieutenant, and then things get crazy, and then you got to deal with the founders, right? So there's just so many layers and things going on. And what I really liked, now that you got me on this soapbox and tangent, I loved how they introduced the Dominion, where like Quark was the one who was kind of like the first person to really get wind of the Dominion, right? And so it was like this kind of shadowy organization that you didn't really understand about, and they were doing like trade arrangements and trade agreements, and people were hinting about the Dominion, and the writers were dropping these little Easter eggs like, ooh, what's the Dominion? Ooh, what's this? What's happening? And then by the end of season 2, I guess they blew it off the hinges. I mean, literally, when they had the Jem'Hadar come in and destroy the Odyssey, right? And you're like, whoa, what just happened here? It's like, holy crap. And part of that's because a lot of us we had just watched 7 years of Next Gen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's a Galaxy class ship on the big screen, on the TV screen, getting blown away by these Jem'Hadar. And we're like, oh, there's that moment of like, wait a minute, what did they just do? They just blew up the beloved ship that we've been watching for 7 years, even though it was the Enterprise. It was still, very similar.
The reason I liked that, I was, man, how old was I? What year did it come out again?
93.
93. Okay, so I was just almost 17, 18 years old.
91. No, was it 91? Shit. You talk, I'll research.
Yeah, but whatchamacall came out in 87. So yeah, I think you're right.
93.
Yeah, 93. So what I liked about it was I always had this issue that in a huge galaxy and this was back when I was watching The Next Generation, that they never had run across another multi-species federation. It bugged me. They never showed Romulans with different polities. They never showed Klingons banded together. And I thought that was really arrogant of the Federation. To this day, I still have an issue with the Prime Directive. And so I was so happy when they not only introduced another multi-special polity, but one that could kick their butts. I was like, thank you. It's about time they clash against another equally powerful government. And the way you just described it with the different tiers of different species that each played a distinct role, I thought that was like, okay, here we go. Now I'm really fixed on this and interested in it. It was hard to watch, as I said before, because if you miss one episode, you miss the ongoing story. So that was an irritant to me. But again, when I went back and watched it on streaming, that solved all that. And then it became, just a great epic with, like you said, some of my favorite characters, Garrick being number one off that show.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So this book, I think, does a good job from when I read through it, talking about the political structure, even talking about some of the things that we didn't see a lot of. Maybe we only saw it on one episode, like Vorta telekinesis. It refers that. Again, another one of my favorite characters is the Tosk, who I don't think we've seen enough of, is highlighted in here. And a lot of those characters we saw in the first seasons of DS9. These one-shot aliens where they came through the wormhole, but what are their civilizations like? So there's some expansion on that here, which I thought was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then a lot of stuff about the worlds, a lot about the different species that are in the Dominion that we've been introduced to. The usual sidebars and in setting material there just to think about. We go into talking about some of their allies like the Breen and the Sona. This was an opportunity. We were able to kind of like sneak in a little bit of references to some of the Next Gen movies just to try to tie in, because that's where it was all happening in that time frame. And of course, I'm sure you appreciated some of the artwork that we were able to drop in here.
The artwork is amazing, which shows the dominance of the Dominion, the Vortas, and how they subjugate worlds. I think really good art. Some of the things, again, the paragraphs that are in here that I could build entire stories off of. There was one paragraph about the buildings on page 23 where it speaks about the Dominion, who uses neutronium to construct its facilities. And neutronium is incredibly strong and resistant to scans from tricorders and other low power sources. And when I read that, I was like, ooh, why is there not a neutronium smuggling ring out of the Gamma Quadrant into the Alpha, selling this off to illegal businesses and Ferengis who don't want to be scanned? I was like, neutronium is a story into itself. So again, I loved some of these, they're not Easter eggs because they were in the show, but they're Easter eggs in this book where you can build an entire campaign off of one paragraph.
Sure thing. Yep. And speaking of Easter eggs, there's two I wanted to highlight. Number one is those of you who are fans of the Kazin. We were able to drop in a few paragraphs about the Kazin, so we dropped that in here. This is probably this might be either the only book or one of the very few books where we were able to drop in some information about the Kazin, because they're not really canon, but they are part of the beta lore, or like secondary canon, whatever you want to call it. So we were able to drop that in. And then on page 39, is because I was at this point in my life on the game, I was starting to transition into the program management role, and so I was taking on a lot of different duties in terms of editing, writing, and art direction. I wrote this art brief for the pack leads meeting, the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta, and there was no way to label this piece of art because we're not labeling the art, but If you go back, you fans who want to follow these Easter eggs, go back to the core book and read. There's a sidebar in there about the Pakleds being the first to head into the Gamma Quadrant to explore. That captain is this guy right here in the seat. I wanted to make sure that I got him in a piece of art somewhere in the game before I was done. So that's Captain. I don't have the name in front of me. Zelnabog, I think. So that's his ship and his crew being boarded by Vorta and some Jem'Hadar while they're in the Gamma Quadrant. So I wanted to make sure I got that in there. And what I love about this picture more than anything else is if you can, those of you,
I'm going to put it up. I'm going to go ahead and put it up so we can all see it.
But it's the Pakled kind of like peeking out from behind the door, behind the Jem'Hadar. Like the artists put that in there on their own. I didn't write that in the art brief. I just had Pakleds talking with Vorta and Jem'Hadar, and they added this little guy, this Pakled, kind of like peeking around the corner, like, what's going on, guys? Mm-hmm. And that's just so perfectly Pakled. And what I think is hilarious is, of course, this predates Lower Decks by several years, right? But this picture fits the Pakled aesthetic that we now know from Lower Decks, right? Like I could totally see this type of character having had happened just based on what we've seen in Lower Decks for the last 2 seasons. So I was very, very pleased that it all worked out. So
I can't say anything. I'm on an NDA, but what I will say is, Jim, this story continues through. If anybody keeps paying attention to all the publications coming out, this story in particular that you started here about the Pakleds and their involvement with the Gamma Quadrant continues if people keep a sharp eye on Star Trek Adventure publications. I personally know I use this as a springboard for a lot. So we'll talk about that at a future time.
Yeah. I am pleased my torrid love affair with the Pakleds has spread to other people, so my job is done.
Yeah, you infected me, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Just your enthusiasm about it. There's some stuff we flew by, but I just want to make note of it because there's notable worlds. And these are worlds that were maybe mentioned in passing in Deep Space Nine. All of you who worked on this book, all the writers, I mean, they went through a fine-tooth comb through every episode of Deep Space Nine and found some of my favorite things that I had questions about. One, the Founder's homeworld, this liquid planet, basically, right? What's its core like? I have all these questions about that, and it's mentioned here. But also Meridian, if anyone remembers the episode where they went to that planet that was phased out of time. Really good early episode of Deep Space Nine. Again, that you could always make a second contact mission to, if you get really creative. So as you're reading through this, it really sparks those episodes. Feel free to find the episodes and watch them again as you're getting this book. But some really good stuff in there about the Gamma Quadrant. Like you said, the breed and the Sona and all the different technology we come across too. This is a busy chapter. For sure.
Yep. And then we got, and then we're still in chapter 2, right? And then we followed up with like 18 to 20 pages all about the war. Like there were like that war lasted 3.5 seasons, plus all the background to it, and then the follow up. And we just tried to pack in just as much as we could into the page count we had available. And the writers, I thought, did a great job on this chapter, because I didn't challenge them, but I said, look, what we need to do with this chapter is really present soup to nuts everything about the war. Beginning, what was happening during the war, end of the war, post-war, ideas for game masters, players, everything that, just as much as we can pack into here, let's do it. And I thought they did a great job tying in a lot of the stuff that happened in like late next gen DS9, and then even some of the movies, like tying in the Sona and some of the other movie elements. And even then dropping in sidebars about like how do you role play in the war? Like how do you, like your science focused character maybe joins Starfleet to be a scientist, but all of a sudden there's a war. So how do you deal with that? And those of you who've been following along our episodes here, you'll know that this chapter was the chapter I handed to Carlos when he was developing the Federation Klingon War chapter in the Discovery book. I said, because he wanted to write the chapter about the war, and I said, okay, the best thing to do is go read the chapter on the Dominion War in the Gamma Quadrant book, because that's going to be your foundational baseline. Like that's what we want for the Discovery book about this war. And he did a great job with that. But this was what really sparked that, is like we want to really go into detail and just provide game masters and players just as much information as we possibly can, pulled from canon, but then also adding more more seeds here.
Well, let me make a suggestion too. I've noticed the tendency with a lot of players coming into the game now, because we know the original setting of the Shackleton Expanse is 2371. Yep. I've noticed a lot of people tend to play after that, and a lot of their new characters coming onto the ships, at least in our game and some other games I've watched online, they had some sort of experience in the Dominion War because it was such a big thing. Well, there's almost every skirmish and war, and the timeline is cataloged here. If you have a player, it's like, hey, you know what? Use these 5 paragraphs and where were you at this time? Maybe that's the skirmish you were involved in. You couldn't be everywhere at once, but there's some fact details in here that could really round out your character's backstory if you truly are a war veteran. So for those of you maybe coming in, it's like, oh, I was part of the Dominion War, and that's all you know. This book is going to give you every corner of that battle and then help you really flesh out your character. I like it when, people are sitting at the bar and they say, yeah, back when, I was in one of the big 3 skirmishes of the war, and they're able to pull out some details. I think that enriches characters.
Yep.
All right. Fantastic. Now let's get down and dirty about those species, the chapter on species.
Yep. So this was a fun challenge for, actually this is the kind of work I like, right? This is the type of chapter where I have to work on, where I'm required to rewatch a whole bunch of Star Trek, but whoa, I have to go watch DS9 again. So, but it was going through the episodes, going through the seasons, and trying to pick out, okay, what species could probably make really cool player character species or player characters, right? And so, the writers and I came up with a fairly long list of species, and then we just started whittling them down. Kind of like, I don't know that we had a rhyme or reason, but we wanted to hit the highlights, right? The really key ones, and then add a couple weird ones in addition. So we got some really cool species in here. The ones I'm really quite proud of are the Dosai and the Karima and the Screens, because I thought the Screens were just a really cool one-off species. And then the Tosk were a fun throw in. I was like, would anybody ever play a Tosk? Well, why not, right? Because like at that point, the fans have been clamoring to play Romulans. And I'm like, if you guys really want to play Romulans, I bet there's somebody out there who wants to play a Tosk. So I'm going to throw a Tosk in here for a playable player character.
I was going to say too, again, I know some of the writers will use these and put them in mission briefs and stuff like that. So people should really keep an eye if they need the stats for that. Yeah, on that. I love the pack leads, probably more than I need to. But as a huge DS9 stan, like I will proudly admit that I am a big fan of the episode Move Along Home, which was a first season episode. A lot of people don't like it for reasons I can't really fathom. Like, I knew it was an early season, it was an early series episode, so it was them still kind of feeling their way, getting to know the characters. But like, when I watch it, I think it's a great story for Quark and a great moral dilemma for him to deal with. Totally.
I love the Wadi as characters, and I was like, sure, I would love to play a Wadi in somebody's campaign. That would be either like a walk-on one-shot or even an ongoing character maybe gets caught up in something and is transported far away from home or whatever. But
why didn't they ever have an episode where the Wadi met the Q? They're all into playing games.
Oh yeah,
imagine them, their civilization trying to outplay Q.
That would be cool. That would be cool. Anyways, I have the Wadi in here.
Yeah, one of my wish lists on this chapter, to tell you the truth, because my memory is not perfect, is there's others like the Dre, the Karima, the Lurians, the Paradins. I know art space is at a premium, but even if it was just a headshot of a drawing of just their heads, just so we can remember their facial features, because in Star Trek, that's really the identifier. That's one thing I do wish we at least had little squares of their headshots, because when I look at just the art, I remember the shows.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and that was always the challenge, especially with these earlier books. Is we just didn't have the page count to fit art for literally everything. That's why a lot of the spaceships didn't have art, and why a lot of the subspecies didn't have art. It's just like we can only do so much, right? And like with the more recent books, with like the Shackleton book and the Discovery book, right? I was more careful to like, okay, we're doing 5 new species here. We're doing pictures for all 5. We got 5 new species in this book. We're doing pictures for all 5. And you'll see that in more upcoming books here, that I tried really hard to make sure that there was a picture for every new species and also the space frames, right? Like, so I don't think I've already revealed this, but in the in the Utopia Planitia Starship book here coming up, I made sure that every space frame has a picture. So you don't have to go to the internet. It's all there in the book. So I get it, right? I hear you, fans. I wasn't able to get pictures of all the space stations and small craft, but all the space frames, they're all in there.
So it'll be more like a shipyard. It'll really be like a shipyard book then, with all the art. I love looking through here and seeing all the different. I know it's all.
Yeah, well, I mean, Eagle Moss Hero Collector, we're able to put a whole lot more art in their stuff because they don't have to worry about the game stat blocks and stuff. But no, I promise, all the space frames we were able to cram into the Utopia book. Every one of them's got a picture. I was able to do some 11th hour scrambling to find a few that we had been missing, and I was prepared to do like a schematic or a badge or something in place of the art, or I was just going to cut it completely. If I couldn't find art, I was just going to cut it. But managed at the 11th hour to find a couple of folks who actually had some good renders on hand and made it work. So yay for that. Well, anyway, back to
speaking of Starship, that gets us right into the next chapter, which we now have an entire new fleet of ships to play with. We have starships of the Dominion War. We have even jumping past some of the Dominion ships, is we have the USS Prometheus, which I thought was kind of interesting that this one was carried here, because it showed up. I thought it showed up the first time in Voyager.
Yeah, it did. And but if I remember the lore right, it was meant to be a Borg fight. I don't remember all the details. I have to read. I have to read it.
It was to fight off the Borg. Yeah, correct.
I'd have to go back and try to remember why the heck did we put the Prometheus in here in the first place. And I don't remember that conversation.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's an awesome ship. That was one of my favorite episodes with the Doctor and the second Doctor, EMH Mark II, the comedian. I just forgot his name. Andy. Forgot his last name.
Maybe it was fan service. I don't remember why we put the Prometheus in here, but we threw it in here, and some fans were happy, some fans were frustrated, but whatever. We added in some more ships. You got the
Either way, it has the task listed there in case anyone's looking for it. Multi-vector assault mode. So that's in the Gamma Quadrant book if you're looking for it.
And the space frame, I've already confirmed that the Prometheus space frame will be in the Utopia Planitia book. So fans can be happy that it's the space frame is formally available. Will be available once the book comes out. So
consolidated. Yeah. There was, again, there's a lot of ships in here. I want to point out on page 90, this was the first mention of the Frankenstein Fleet that I recall. Yep. There may have been a brief mention in the core rule book. I can't recall, but this was an extension of the Frankenstein Fleet. And what I thought was really neat about it is after the Battle of Wharf 359, ship parts flying everywhere, of course. You're not going to trash it all. And I think there was even some SCE books about recovering those materials and building the ships. So I thought that was really neat, the history of the rules set for if you're trying to pull different space frames together in order to build these Frankenstein ships. I thought that was so cool.
Yep, and shout out to our good friend Aaron Palea. He wrote the vast majority of this chapter. As he does, he writes most of the starships for us. So he did all this stuff. He came up with the rules for the Frankenstein Fleet. And if I remember right, I think Nathan Dowdell, I think he reviewed them and was good with them. But Nathan being the 2D20 developer and the original developer of the SCA game. So for those of you who care about having Nathan, bless the stuff that's in the books that he didn't work on, formally, there it is. But great stuff by Aaron as always. Always enjoy to review his stuff and get it added into the book.
That's right. Cool. All right. Now we move into exploring the Gamma Quadrant, Chapter 5. Okay, one of my favorite parts of all these books are these suggested encounters. A lot of details in here. And what I thought was really cool is you get deep into Bajor lore. How does that sound? Bajor lore.
Bajor lore. Yes, indeed. Bajor, right? So this was an opportunity to throw a whole bunch of plot seeds, plot hooks, plot ideas, etc. for the game master. And then even the player, right? If the player picks this up and is casually browsing it, and they say, hey, that's really cool. I want to play a Bajoran. Let's get this in here. We talk a lot about the orbs, the different Bajoran orbs. We talk about...
which I used, by the way, I want to tell people this, which I used to create our own orb in our game, because those are the orbs we know about. there's other orbs out there. And so this is a cool chapter to give you a framing around orbs.
Yep, and if you're a fan of the DS9 novels that came out in the early 2000s to 2010s, there's some great DS9 Bajoran / type of novels out there that add even more orbs to the storyline. So there's a lot of cool secondary canon stuff out there to mine for ideas if you're so inclined.
Cool. All right, let's talk about some of those encounter seeds.
Encounter seeds here for like the early part of the chapter, Bajoran wormhole, different things that you can get into with the Dominion and the Gamma Quadrant in general, encountering Tosk and other stuff like that, dealing with the prophets. And then we offer a selection of NPCs like we usually do in these books. We got a bunch of Dominion NPC, Jem'Hadar Bordas, other Dominion species that you can drop into things.
Don't fly by too fast because there's some cool. I'm always looking at the stats and seeing what's cool. The special rules for Jem'Hadar, they're kind of scary. They got resistance 2 armor, and if you played the game, you know anything with resistance 2 is not easy to take down. But then there's this thing called the Shroud, where a Jem'Hadar may spend 2 threat as a minor action to become virtually invisible, increasing the difficulty of all tasks to basically see them. So I thought that was a really cool, adaptive, scary rule because Jem'Hadar are scary.
Yeah. Yep. So then we move on to another section of encounters and possibilities, talking about the front line. So this is the theory being that you are working your way through the war. You're a ship, you're a crew, right there on the front lines, getting into the heat of the fighting and the battles. And how does that impact you? What does that mean? How does that impact your stories and your game types? Can there be some intrigue? Could you be in the middle of the politics, right? The whole politicking between the Alpha Quadrant species. Are they going to band together? Are they going to sign treaties with the Dominion? Are they going to sign non-aggression pacts? Like, how does that all work out? How does your player characters get involved in the middle of those political intrigue conversations? That kind of stuff.
If you could go back in time, would you have turned these into mission briefs?
Yes.
Yeah, because they really, anyone who's familiar and loves mission briefs like I do, all of these could have been a campaign of mission briefs the way they were written. They're really well done. And so it's not that hard. We have episodes on how to create a mission brief. You could always take a look at that. But if you want to have a really rock'em sock'em Dominion War campaign, take this and use those principles.
Yeah, I mean, this was all predating mission briefs, of course. This was all probably like the gestational stuff in my head as I was working through, like, I really want to do some strong episode seeds here, plot hooks, etc. And so they started off as a few sentences in like the core book. They became a paragraph here, and then I expanded them to a full page in the mission brief. So don't think I'll go beyond a page, but although I know we've talked about maybe expanding them even further. But so this was the evolution of mission briefs, I guess, is kind of the DNA is in here, where we got, a paragraph is really good because, like, these paragraphs are solid idea generators, but you add a little bit more meat to them, and then all of a sudden they're a mission brief.
Yeah, just expand. I always tell people, expand out a point you like and create 3 challenges, 3 task roles based off of or 3 either a combination of tasks and challenges off of that, and you have some action. We then move on to some major characters like General Martok. We also have Kai Wynn, who we all love to hate, right? And the one thing that makes me sad is obviously it had to be some sort of editing issue. Her focuses aren't in here.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, and of course, they would be scummy, whiny, deceitful, manipulative. I know what they are, but I did notice that. I was always curious to see what hers.
I'm gonna have to go back to the original manuscript and see if I can find them. We must have just missed that, and that's weird that it's happened before too, and it was with a different designer. But I think based on what I understand of InDesign, when you've got the different blocks of text, when you're moving stuff around, especially from one page to the next page, like you can move that stuff onto a holding space, and then you probably just forgot to pull it back in, I guess. But apologies for that omission. I'll get that corrected at some point. And
just type in negative snake-like qualities and then pick the first 6 you get.
Actually, she's only got one focus. The focus is my child.
She gives me the creeps.
Yeah, she's
worse than Gold Dukat. I'd rather spend overnight with Gold Dukat than Kai Wynn.
Yeah, she was great character because she's one of those characters that you just love to hate, right? It's just like the instant you see her on screen, you're like, ah.
So hypocritical. The most passive aggressivity. That would be one of her focuses.
There you go.
Passive aggressivity. She's a queen of that, for sure.
Actually, you got me thinking. I'm gonna have to go. We'll make this an exclusive for the show here. Let me.
You're gonna look it up. While you look it up, I'm gonna talk about some of the other focuses that I like.
Yeah, sure thing.
While you're digging that in, I love Gold Dukat, of course, another fantastic Cardassian character, where he, amazingly though, being Cardassian, has focuses of Bajoran culture and Bajoran religion, which I thought was really nice because he's obsessed with the Bajorans. He hates to love them, loves to hate them. It's just such a complex character. And then also between Wayun, who of course we all love, the clone, you never know which Wayun you're dealing with. He has propaganda, and the founder leader, if you remember her and her horrible skin problems in the very last season, she had brinksmanship, which is the first time I've ever seen that as a focus. And we're all about get creative with your focuses. Those between the values and the focuses, that makes the character. All right. Did you find it yet?
I found the manuscript, and I'll tell you what, the reason that they're not in the book is because they are not in the manuscript. We that's a whiff. We missed including focuses for Kai Wynn.
My God! Because you know what? Everyone that hates her, they just want to get past her. They didn't want to deal with her anymore. I can understand why that happened.
But now that I'm reviewing the book and I just looked at the manuscript, I remember that the manuscript, that was adding Martok, Dukat, Wynn, and Wayun was a last minute addition, because we actually had like 4 pages. We were 4 pages under the budget, right? We had a little bit of room. And I was like, well, there's an opportunity here. I think we need to put some major NPCs in here. I think that was something that we had missed earlier, right? And at the time, I think Sam was still the line manager, and said, well, can you whip up 4 or 5 characters for me real quick? And so I'll own it because I wrote them.
Got it.
But this was just a super last minute. I think I did this over a short weekend and just banged these out as fast as I possibly could, and missed the focuses. So apologies, folks.
Okay.
I'll have to put together a list and try to come up with some good focuses for Kai Wynn.
Hey, all I gotta say is compared to the Alpha and Beta Quadrant books, which are good, this one shows the passion that went into it. The people who wrote this, even though we're all fans of Star Trek and whoever wrote these, but this one was just totally richer, because now that I'm looking fresh through them for the shows, this one was the richest tapestry of characters and depth and history. Like I said, it read like mission briefs, a lot of it, that way when I was reviewing it. So good job on the Gamma Quadrant.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else you know before heading out?
No, just again, this is even though it's only been three or 4 years, it feels like a lifetime ago. But a lot of people who worked on this book have moved on to different things, and just want to thank all of them for all their work on the book. Really appreciate it. We grew the line from here, but this was a big foundational book because I know a lot of folks really wanted Dominion War stuff, and this really became the Dominion War book plus Gamma Quadrant. So this was truly, like, I'm grateful that you said you saw the passion in it, because this was one of those books, like as I was transitioning toward the project management job, that I was like, I have an opportunity to really shape this one and add a lot of my love for DS9 and Star Trek into this one. So, last point though, there's a bit of sadness around this book as well. During the final development of this, like as we were going into layout and getting ready to finalize it, both longtime Star Trek writer DC Fontana passed away, and then the huge blow at the time, especially, anybody dying is horrible, but Renee Auberjonois passed away as well. And
wasn't it Aaron Eisenberg?
He passed away later, a little bit later. But both DC and Renee passed away, and it was an opportunity to get in a heartfelt thank you for both of them, and in memory of for both of them.
Yeah, that was really nice. I want to say too, you know, for people who are like, oh, I'm not playing in the Gamma Quadrant period, we aren't playing in the Gamma Quadrant, my game either, but we're playing in a different galaxy, and we made the other galaxy home to the Celestial Prophets. It's their origination point. So another way I use this book and everything I could about the Bajorans and Celestial Prophets to create a piece. So there's nuggets in here. You know, the thing is, the more you read as game masters, the more ideas you're going to have, and everything's going to pull together. So fantastic job on this. We want to do our shout outs, of course. I have a question. If game shops wanted to order these, can they still order these? They're still in reprint?
Yeah, these are still in print.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to give a shout out to, this is a cool one. Phil O'Neill gives us a shout out from Bay City Plaza, Geelong, Victoria, Australia. And his favorite store is Mind Games. We also going to go international. We have Heroes Beacon in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. That's Scott Kimball who wanted to shout out that. And we're going to bring it back to the United States with Atomic Games in Muncie, Indiana, USA. Thomas McManus shouted them out. And Benjamin Sloan shouts out Fox Comics and Games in Marion, Illinois. So those are our shout outs, because we always loving the brick and mortars for keeping the games alive. Jim, who are you shouting out today?
Well, I just shouted out most of the folks that were involved in the book. I want to thank them. And I also want to issue a correction, because you were right. It was Aaron Eisenberg who passed away while we were developing this book. I had actually flipped to the next thing that we're going to be talking about in the next episode.
Okay.
So yes, Aaron Eisenberg, we were able to get in memory for him into the book. So loving memory of him and all the work he did, both on and off Star Trek. So that'll be my shout out for this one.
All right, that's worth it. All right, everyone, IDIC. Till next time when we cover the Delta Quadrant.
Live long and prosper. Be safe, be well. Talk to you next time.